People have called it the heist of the century. It's a crime of just audacious planning, meticulous execution, and a prize that, well, it captured the world's imagination. But this story of a near-perfect crime is also the story of one single fatal mistake. So let's get into how it all went down.
Picture this. It's August 8th, 1963. A Royal Mail train is hurtling through the English countryside, going from Glasgow to London. But then, all of a sudden, the driver, Jack Mills, sees something that just shouldn't be there, a red signal at a place called Sears Crossing. That signal is supposed to be green. So he slams on the brakes, the train screeches to a halt in the absolute middle of nowhere, and the night just goes silent.
Okay, so this wasn't just any mail train. Tucked away in one of its coaches, the high-value packages coach, were mailbags stuffed to the brim with cash. We're talking a staggering amount, worth over £67 million in today's money. And that massive payday is what made this train the target for one of the most ambitious heists ever.
So you have to be asking, how could a gang of criminals possibly know about this specific train on this specific night? Well, it wasn't just luck. It all started with an almost flawless plan, a plan that was born from some incredible inside knowledge.
Now, the operation was headed up by a guy named Bruce Reynolds, but the real secret weapon here was an anonymous source, an insider, someone deep inside the Royal Mail security. And this source, whose identity is still a mystery, gave them two absolutely critical pieces of intelligence.
And these two little facts changed absolutely everything. First, the insider told them that the high-value coach being used that night was an older reserve model. And the crucial difference? It had no security alarm. And second, because of a recent bank holiday, the coach was carrying nearly 10 times its usual load of cash. I mean, it was the perfect storm of opportunity.
With the plan locked in and the target right where they wanted it, the 16-man gang moved into position. It was time to execute the heist of the century.
And they moved fast, like lightning fast. 3 a.m., the train stops. By 3:10, the phone lines are cut, and the assistant driver is captured. It was just a blur of motion. The gang storms the engine, they uncouple the valuable coaches, and they get ready to make their getaway.
But this is where they hit their first snag. Turns out the retired train driver they'd brought along couldn't figure out the modern controls on this particular engine. So, in a moment of just brutal improvisation, they viciously hit the train's actual driver, Jack Mills, with an iron bar, and forced the poor injured man to drive his own train 1 more kilometer down the track to where they needed it to be.
So they get to Bridego Bridge, and the true scale of what they just stole must have been mind-blowing. Inside that one coach, 120 mailbags. A staggering 2.5 tons of cash. This wasn't just a robbery, it was practically a military operation.
With their getaway truck waiting under the bridge, the gang formed a human chain, just frantically passing these heavy bags from the train down to the road. They knew the clock was ticking. They had a tiny window before the rest of the train crew could raise the alarm. They gave themselves 15 minutes, and they managed to load all but 8 of the bags before just vanishing into the night.
They'd done it. The money was loaded, the night was their cover, the perfect crime was complete. Or so they thought. Because in all that adrenaline, one of the gang members said just 5 words. 5 words that would unravel everything. It all started with one careless whisper.
They sped 43 kilometers to their hideout, a rented place called Leatherslade Farm. Once they were safely inside, they tuned a radio to the police frequency, listening in as the authorities scrambled to figure out what in the world had just happened. They thought they were in the clear.
But this is the moment it all went wrong. As the last robber left the train car, he turned to the captive postal workers and gave them a warning. Don't move for 30 minutes. It was meant to be a threat, right? To make sure they got away clean. Instead, it became their undoing.
So, why was that so important? Well, because when the police heard this, they did some pretty simple math. A vehicle can travel roughly 50 kilometers in 30 minutes. That single sentence instantly gave them a search radius. The net had just been cast, and man, it was shrinking fast.
So incredibly, the very thing the robbers were using to stay ahead, that police radio, was about to become their downfall. And that brings us to the most iconic part of this whole investigation, the Monopoly board clue.
Listening to their radio, the gang heard the police announce they were searching all farms and isolated buildings within a 50-kilometer radius of the crime scene. Suddenly, their hideout wasn't a safe house, it was a trap. Panic just completely set in. Their plan to lay low until Sunday? Gone.
They split the cash and they fled on Friday, days ahead of schedule.
And in their rush, they got sloppy. They'd hired someone to burn the farm down after they left, but the guy just took their money and disappeared. So when the police, tipped off by a neighbor, raided the farm, they found a gold mine of evidence. Empty mailbags, the truck, and most famously, fingerprints all over a Monopoly board the gang had been playing, get this, using the real stolen money.
The game was over. The fingerprints scattered all over that Monopoly board were basically a death sentence for the gang's freedom. For them, it meant justice was coming. But for an innocent man caught in the middle of it all, it meant tragedy.
See, because these were known criminals, their fingerprints were already on file. That Monopoly board was the smoking gun. One by one, the police matched the prints, and the dominoes just started to fall. In the end, 14 of the 16-man crew were identified and captured.
And this really sums up the final outcomes. The gang members who were caught got sentences of up to 30 years in prison. The driver, Jack Mills, who was assaulted during the heist, he never fully recovered from his injuries and the trauma. He couldn't work again, and he died just 7 years later. And the inside man, the mysterious source who made the whole thing possible, he was never identified.
30 years. I mean, those sentences were incredibly harsh, way beyond the norm for a robbery, even one this big. And that's because this wasn't just about stolen money. It was seen as an attack on a national institution, a brazen challenge to the state itself. The verdict sent a shockwave through the criminal underworld. A crime this audacious could never be allowed to happen again.
And yet, for all that we know, after all the arrests and all the years served in prison, the biggest question of the Great Train Robbery is still unanswered. Who was the man on the inside? Who was the anonymous source that handed the gang the crime of the century on a silver platter? That remains the final unsolved piece of the puzzle.